We went on a trip this week down into southeastern Oregon, and the basic reason that we went is to observe plants and animals and the landscape, of which there is none other like it in the deserts of the Pacific Northwest. Some of the species that we saw are only known to reach southeast Oregon, and they do not go any further north. Their distribution is limited because of habitat and the plant communities that are in those areas. We are out here in an absolutely incredibly beautiful place known as Succor Creek. Succor Creek is wild country. It is a geologic formation that is absolutely spectacular, and it is the traditional native tribal grounds of the northern Paiute Indians. These tribes hunted these areas and depended on the water in Succor Creek here. And it's not sucker as in gotcha, it is succor as in buoy up and take care of. So it is a stream that has taken care of generations of wildlife and many generations of humans. It is truly an amazing area. Some of the plants that we have found this morning are just incredible desert species, and we've also found some invasive species. So I will start out with the invasives. One grass species that has been introduced here, and it came in via side-by-sides and ATVs and pickups, and that's a Ventenata, which is a highly invasive, non-native, and it has a bad habit of dominating wherever it gets a root. In the roots of the Ventenata grass is a communal fungus, a symbiotic relation that the Ventenata has with a fungus. And the fungus produces a toxin that acts as a natural herbicide, and it eliminates all of the plants out ahead of the expanding Ventenata grass, eliminating any competition for the Ventenata, and the Ventenata then grows like mad. Oh, wow. We just had white-throated swifts go over us, beautiful. Anyway, the Ventenata grass is wherever this area has been grazed by cattle, which is a lot. There's footprints in every square foot out here. That's really disturbing because this is public land. So the other interesting plant that we had was a beautiful astragalus or loco weed, which is native here. And this particular loco weed attracts loads of native pollinators because this loco weed is poison. It used to be in the 1920s, late 19th century, sheep herders would run their animals through here and they would dig it all up because it kills sheep, and they eat it and it will kill them. It also will kill a human being, and so it's not a good idea to eat astragalus. Another beautiful plant that we had was one called yampum, and yampum is native and it is absolutely gorgeous. It's a plant that I often find in the Blue Mountains, and I was kind of surprised to find it out here. It is yellow out here and grows off of the same root system year in and year out. It's absolutely gorgeous. Another plant that we found were phlox, purple phlox, and they grow at the base of rocks, and it's for two reasons. One is that cattle have a rough time grazing right up against a rock, and cattle love to eat phlox plants. And so when the cattle get there, they can't get right to the base, and that gives phlox an opportunity to bloom. The other thing is that rocks collect water, and water runs off the rock into the ground around a periphery around the base of that rock, which gives those plants greater moisture in the soil, and they are able to bloom much more readily than if they were out many yards from a rock. The rock that this particular bunch of phlox is blooming is covered with 5 or 6 species of lichen that are all different colors, just absolutely beautiful. So here in Succor Creek drainage, lichens are prevalent. There are absolutely dozens of them. The other thing that's very interesting is Succor Creek itself. It is absolutely plugged with, unfortunately, algae, which is an indicator of high nutrients in the water and allows Succor Creek to become overburdened with all kinds of algae, mostly brown algae and a little bit of blue-green. Algae remove the oxygen from the water and make it very difficult for fish or amphibians to survive it. But despite that, there is enough flow and there are small fish in Succor Creek. The other thing that lives in Succor Creek are beavers, and they do create pools. And another animal, native, are river otters, American river otter. And they are a big predator. They're a member of the mustelid family, which puts them in the weasel family. And a big river otter are absolutely very, very gifted predators. There's nothing they will not go after smaller than themselves. Some other plants that we found out here that are truly amazing are bitterbrush that had a tent caterpillar tent in it. Tent caterpillars are also known as instars, and they are the larvae form of a moth. And the moth lays its eggs on the antelope bush or the bitterbrush, and then those eggs hatch and they form instars or small caterpillars. And as they feed on the emerging leaves of the plant, they continue to expand and grow and split out of the original skin and get larger and larger and larger. And the whole time they're building this tent. And it is to protect them from the sun and predators. Unfortunately, for some tent caterpillars, birds have learned to go through the webbing of a tent and eat the instars out of the tent. So that saves the plant being eaten and all of its branches stripped. So nature provides controls on large numbers of tent caterpillars. We have a beautiful native heather that grows on the rock faces here. It's absolutely beautiful. And it's a member of the heather family, but it's not termed a heather in the Northwest, but it grows only on hot rock. And right here. Anna's swallowtail. Very cool. Oh, you did? Western fence lizard then. Excellent. We're seeing so much stuff, living animals right here, just standing here. It's amazing. So anyway, another weed we found is called spurger. It is from Asia, and it was brought in with cattle, bringing feed into cattle. And it's spread by use of 4x4s and pickup trucks and ATVs, and the seed goes everywhere. And then cattle sometimes eat it, and that seed is in their droppings, and that's just a ready mix for more. So, sorry, looking at a Becker's white, a butterfly. So anyway, this is truly an amazing sight, and there's a massive battle going on between the native organisms that live here and the invasives that we have brought in. It's amazing to see what survives in some areas and what cannot because of it's outcompeted by invasive plants. So invasive plants are a massive issue in the desert areas of the Pacific Northwest. Today, we also came across an amazing geologic creation, and that is thunder eggs. So this area is loaded with what's called tuff, which is compressed ash with bits and pieces of basalt in it. And it also captures large pockets of air. And when that tuff is still hot, silicate gets in some of those, and it forms all kinds of like jasper and forms agate, and it creates thunder eggs. And lots of rockhounds love thunder eggs, but most people that are looking for them have no idea where to look or what they look like. And so today we have found broken thunder eggs right along the road. beautiful. Thunder eggs come in all sizes. Some are pockets of crystals, quartz crystals. Some are full of agate. Some are full of tuff, the parent material that they formed in. They're absolutely gorgeous. We also located a western rattlesnake. This is the only poisonous rattlesnake in the Pacific Northwest. This was a species that is found throughout eastern Oregon and Washington. This particular race is the Great Basin race of the western rattlesnake. They love rocks, and they love to hide in rocky areas, and they feed on rodents, lizards, and sometimes they get fed on by owls and hawks and other predators. The interesting thing about western rattlesnakes is that some subspecies are extremely slow and put up with a lot. Others are incredibly hot-tempered and go to rattling very, very quickly. So you never know. And not only are there species differentiations, but some western rattlesnakes will have very individual behaviors that a lot of people don't think about, but just like human beings, most animals have very unique individual behaviors. And so sometimes you will find one that's just as mild and mellow as can be, and then you'll find one that's ready to take you out. So rattlesnakes are incredibly interesting. Another species that we came across is a collared lizard. Collared lizards are relatively difficult to locate. They love to be in basalt rock areas where they have shale, and they like to get under those stones and ambush other lizards. They are primarily a lizard hunter. They can grow up to 11 inches long in the Pacific Northwest, and they are only found in southeastern Oregon. I do not know of any populations in eastern Washington. The interesting thing about collared lizards is that they are incredibly fast. This is a lizard that can cover amazing distances in a very, very short time. And the other skill they have is climbing vertical rock walls. They can go right up them in a great speed. They are an incredibly interesting animal because their hind legs are huge, powerful feet, powerful muscles in the hind legs, and much smaller upper feet and legs. And that's because they will get up on their hind legs and run across the landscape to chase down another lizard species. Another interesting thing is that there are several other species of collared lizards in southern United States and in the desert Southwest. This one that we have here is very difficult to locate, so I felt very, very happy to find this particular species. Today, we are out in the northern Great Basin. Great Basin is the largest western desert. It stretches from south of Las Vegas, Nevada, into North Harney County, Oregon. It's a vast desert. It's also known as Oregon's Outback because it has a low human population. It has many more cattle than humans, and it is very, very dry. Because it is an arid area, there are certain plants that grow here that grow nowhere else in Oregon. So I'll start off with Indian paintbrush, which is a parasitic plant. And the one that we found today is parasitic on the root systems of sagebrush. It is a flaming red, absolutely beautiful. The interesting thing about it is the leaves that are red, and it's not the flower at all. And so it is absolutely eye-catching. Another plant we found was desert phlox, which grow in very, very tight, almost looks like a bouquet. And they're an indicator that there was some moisture here, probably a rainstorm a week ago or so. And they were in full bloom, just beautiful. And then we found a lomatium species, absolutely beautiful, has beautiful compound leaves, grows right up against the ground and blooms against the ground. The other thing that we found was something that neither of us had ever heard of or seen. And that was last night, an inflorescing lichen. And some of them were day-glow orange, some were yellow, some were green, and one species, they glowed purple. And it was spread all over the rocks. And Dan got beautiful photos of it. So now it's my job to go and find out what kind of lichen glows like that. Another organism we found were beautiful scorpions that under a UV light just glow like they're on fire. And we found 5 of those last night. So just an amazing area, and all these plants and animals have a relationship. And that's what the natural world is all about, is relationships. Nothing out here is an island unto itself. It's all dependent on another. So that's an important thing to remember. Down in southeastern Oregon this week, we came across an area that is so vast and huge that you cannot believe it unless you've seen it. It is a massive area, and lots of people go through there on Highway 95 and make grand assumptions that there's nothing out there but sagebrush. Well, that's farthest thing from the truth. While we were driving out across these areas on distant back roads, we came across a beautiful stream. It's called North Rye Stream. And it is absolutely an amazing little stream because it has all kinds of clear water flowing through it. It has all kinds of water insects, aquatic insects in it. And we were able to take a close look at some of those insects. What's interesting is that way out in the vast, vast, dry, arid desert, here are these streams flowing. And these streams are absolutely essential to life for so many animals that depend on them. And so as we humans drive through these areas, it is a great thing to remember that there are vast areas that have water, and they have relationships and dependencies among many, many different species. Really important. Another amazing area that we came across was Mickey Hot Springs. Mickey Hot Springs is a whole series of hot boiling glory holes, pools, big hot pools. And what's amazing is that all this water comes boiling to the surface there and flushes and pops and boils out across the ground. In that water are several brown algae, along with a few blue-green algae that are able to survive that extreme hot water. And some of that water is well over 160 degrees. It is truly a place that you would never expect any plant life to be able to survive. And yet these algae survive just beautifully in this extremely hot water. They're called extremophiles, and extremophiles can take the heat. And because they're there, oftentimes there are other organisms that feed on that algae. And in some of the hot springs in that area, there are small worms that actually can withstand those extreme temperatures and do very, very well. Mickey Springs is a very, very interesting area because it's also extremely rare type of habitat site. And because of where it is in this extremely high, hot water site, there's also terrestrial plants that grow there. And one of those is the evening primrose, which is absolutely tiny, and yet it can grow in the most extreme conditions on these bare, gravelly sites that no other plant will survive on. In far eastern Oregon is an amazing canyon, and it is called Leslie Gulch. And it's not too far from another amazing canyon known as Succor Creek. Leslie Gulch is deep and narrow, and it has this beautiful stream that cuts down through it. But the thing that's amazing about it is its geology. Leslie Gulch is tuff, which is hot ash from volcanic eruptions. Only these eruptions were not massive volcanoes. They were volcanic eruptions that seeped out across the ground and had ash and billowing steam, and all of that went down into draws. Then over years, water poured through there and created these deep, deep canyons that cut down through the tuff. And tuff is simply old ash. And it has bits and pieces of basalt in it, and sometimes lots and lots of obsidian in it. And that's all along through the tuff. The interesting thing about Leslie Gulch is that it has a riparian buffer along the edge of that stream, as does Succor Creek. But Leslie Gulch's riparian buffer is in even a more narrow confine. And that makes it even more important to all kinds of wild animals that depend on those plants to get out of the hot sun in the summer and the cold wind in the winter. So Leslie Gulch is one beautiful, beautiful destination. And the interesting thing is, a lot of human beings go there because it is restful. It is somewhere where you can sit and enjoy the beauty of the area. Unfortunately, there are those that also consider it a place to ride their dirt bikes and ride their ATVs and rip and tear through there, regardless of what others are trying to experience. And it's really unfortunate. All across the deserts of the Pacific Northwest, there are those that come out to make noise and those that come for silence, to rejuvenate and enjoy the bird songs and the flowers and what they see. Over the centuries, mankind has always gone to the deserts, and they have gone out there to recuperate, to get away from stressful events, and to enjoy what the desert offers. There's nothing that beats an early morning in a desert. It is beautiful. And in the evening, it's gorgeous. And then at night, the stars are brilliant in a desert. And that's because of lack of pollutants. The interesting thing is, deserts have always been somewhere where a person could get away from general life and recuperate. Always keep that in mind when you're going to a desert. Are you going to allow someone to recuperate and recharge their batteries, or are you going to be out there making tons of noise? Noise disturbs the wildlife, it disturbs the people that are trying to enjoy it, and it's really disturbing to the ecology of the area. If you're ripping across country, you create all kinds of erosion issues, you bring petroleum into streams, you do all kinds of things that are detrimental to that area. Your scars you leave on a desert are long, long lasting. So one of the things I never forget, and that is, in the Sahara Desert, there are places that still have tank tracks from World War II in them that are still there. There are places where fuel dumps were left, and those 55-gallon drums are still there. And so deserts don't allow things to rot away and disappear. And so what we leave will always be there. And so unless you want your legacy to be garbage in a desert, don't leave garbage. In the desert areas of the Pacific Northwest, there have been a number of bird species that have been introduced from Asia. And one of those birds is the chukar, which is a partridge. They are a beautiful bird. And the interesting thing is they love to get and hold up in desert canyons. They love rocks. They love steep, steep slopes. And they inhabit these areas. They were brought here so folks would have something to hunt. Chukars are probably the most challenging game bird to go hunt because they are brilliant. They see a human, they know to jump up no more than a foot high and fly over the edge of the ridge. And that leaves a lot of people really frustrated that are used to hunting ducks that are over their heads. Chukars have all kinds of calls and sounds that they make. But the one call that gets me is early in the morning, you hear them calling and it echoes off the canyon walls. You just know you're in a wild place because chukars do not inhabit areas that are crowded with human beings. They won't do it. When you hear chukars, you know you're in a fairly isolated desert area. Chukars do not live in moist forests. Chukars do not live in desert grasslands even. They love those rocks and those deep canyons. And that is where they prefer, and that's where they bring off their young. Keep in mind that they are not a native species, but they certainly have been an addition to the deserts of the Pacific Northwest.